A deadly conflict in northern Ethiopia is raising concerns about an all-out civil war. The fighting has allegedly left hundreds of people dead and has tens of thousands more fleeing the country. Fighting broke out in Tigray last week when Ethiopian Prime Minister and Nobel Peace Prize winner Abiy Ahmed announced he sent military troops into the region, accusing local soldiers of attacking a military base. The United Nations says the conflict has left nearly 900 aid workers struggling to communicate with the outside world and stranded more than 1,000 tourists. Joining us now to talk more about this is foreign correspondent Deborah Pata. Hi, Deborah. So what are the latest developments out of the region?
Tanya, the crisis has reached a very dangerous tipping point, threatening to destabilize the entire region, the Horn of Africa. In fact, we've just had confirmation from Amnesty International, who say that they can confirm that hundreds of people have been killed already in this fighting. There's witnesses talk about bodies being strewn across streets with gaping wounds, possibly inflicted by machetes and knives. Today, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said that the government military, had captured the western part of Tigray, and in response, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, known as the TPLF, say they've declared a state of emergency to protect the security of their state. Tigray is one of 10 semi-autonomous states in Ethiopia, and all these states have their own police and militia, so you can imagine just how volatile the situation is. Thousands of refugees streaming across into neighboring Sudan. We understand at least 10,000 have already crossed the border in the past few days, and aid organizations saying that they're unable to restock emergency health and medical supplies. So a very grim situation indeed. And so far, Abiy Ahmed has refused all urgent calls from the United Nations and the African Union to bring about some kind of immediate ceasefire and start peace negotiations.
So, Deborah, can you back us up for a moment and explain how we got here? What is the history between Prime Minister Ahmed and the regional government there, the Tigray People's Liberation Front? Are there long-standing rivalries? What exactly is this conflict about?
Well, last week, when the entire world on Wednesday was waiting for the results of the United States elections, Abiy Ahmed was sending those military troops into Tigray, and he claims that local forces, Tigray forces, attacked a government national military base, and he had to attack them. Now, I should point out that there's been no independent verification of that. There's an information blackout, which is why only now we're learning those latest details from Amnesty International because of this information blackout. Abiy Ahmed really came to power 2 years ago on a very ambitious reform agenda. He was going to be the man who would transform Ethiopia, which was regarded at that time as one of the most repressive countries on the African continent, and he was going to fight and root out corruption. Now, the TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, say they've been disproportionately targeted by that anti-corruption drive. Many top officials in national government have lost their positions since Abiy Ahmed came to power. The TPLF, or the Tigrayan people, really form only 6% as an ethnic group of the 110 million strong population in Ethiopia, but they've had disproportionate political and economic power in the region for a very long time. They were crucial, in fact, in overthrowing the dictatorship of Mengistu, and from that they formed a very strong leadership role in the governing coalition. And now what has happened, you've had this anti-corruption drive, they've been targeted, and things really reached a tipping point in September when Abiy Ahmed banned local parliamentary elections, citing the coronavirus and the pandemic. The TPLF, the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front, said that this was nothing more than a ploy by Abiy Ahmed to grab power, and things, of course, all came to a head last week with that alleged attack on a military base. Tanya?
Now, as you mentioned, Prime Minister Ahmed has not been in power for very long, but there was so much hope, at the beginning of his leadership. And now there are fears, as you pointed out, that, this country is really on the brink of civil war. And as we mentioned earlier, Prime Minister Ahmed is a Nobel Peace Prize winner. Do you think this could be a case of the prize perhaps being awarded prematurely?
It certainly could be. And I mean, history is littered with examples, unfortunately, of some recipients having received the Nobel Peace Prize and not really living up to their title as a peacemaker. Think of Aung San Suu Kyi and the persecution of the Rohingya Muslims. Abiy Ahmed received that Peace Prize last year, and at the time he said that war really is like hell. And now it looks like he's quite happy to unleash that kind of hell onto his own country. This is a man who won the Peace Prize because he was able to make international peace. He was able to end the 2 decades-old conflict between Eritrea and Ethiopia, but he is unable to bring peace domestically. As I mentioned, the Tigray People's Liberation Front is a very powerful, dominant political force, and Abiy Ahmed is a member of the majority Oromo ethnic group, and by sidelining the Tigrayan people, he has brought the country to definitely the brink of civil war. And unfortunately, Tanya, that war could really fracture along ethnic lines. And that is the tragedy of where Ethiopia is right now. The man who was supposed to bring democratic form no longer is seen as that as all. And a man who is rushed with somewhat unseemly haste, many would argue, to a military resolution rather than a peaceful resolution of that conflict.
All right. Well, Deborah Pata, thank you so much for that update on the crisis in northern Africa.